Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Liberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 233 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Liberman, and today I'm really excited to talk with you about this topic of leadership. Leadership as an independent consultant. So many of us think leadership doesn't apply anymore, and I want to share with you how that's a mistake that so many consultants make, including myself, up until recently. And I want to really dive into this today because if it's something you're overlooking or thinking that you've moved past in your career, it could be something that's really holding you back in terms of the ability to reach the goals you've set for your business. So I want to dive into this today about the leadership mistake I commonly see independent consultants making and what impact it makes for your business and what to do about it, and how leadership does apply to you as an independent consultant, but in a different way. So not in the way you might be imagining or the way that we typically think about leadership. So that's what we're here for today. I want to help point this out to you because it may be a blind spot that you've got that you want to be addressing so that you can move yourself closer to and beyond the goals that you've set for yourself. So before we do, though, I thought I'd give you a quick personal update, some great news and some not so great news. The great news is the summer is now officially over. And while it was amazing and such a great summer where I reduced my client load so I could focus on the clients that I had and also be able to do a lot of family things this summer. I'm now back at my normal pace. So if you've been wanting to consider one-on-one coaching, my consultation calendar is reopened. You can go look at consultmelisa.com, Melisa, it's missing a letter or a couple of letters, melisa.com to find a time if you're interested in exploring one-on-one coaching and how that can make an impact for you and your business. And then on the not so amazing side, you might know I live in Colorado. I grew up on a multi-generational cattle ranch. My family, over 130 years ago, homesteaded here after immigrating from England. So this is something that is part of not only my, childhood, but really my way of life and my family's way of life. My parents still operate it and they're in their 70s. Anyway, it is at the moment being threatened by this wildfire that has been, I guess it's now the fourth or fifth largest in Colorado history. And so that's been really weighing on my mind. And I wanted to share that with you. It's such a huge part of my life and what's created my work ethic in so many ways. And I wanted to share that with you just to kind of share a personal note and something that is a bit stressful for myself and my family. So anyone out there who's also experiencing something stressful, being able to continue working and having the flexibility of the type of business model that we have, I just feel so grateful for it. So that is what's happening over here at Melisa Liberman Coaching on a personal side and a business side. And with that, let's dive into today's episode, which is all about leadership. Leadership as an independent consultant, or you might have a boutique consultancy. So then the more traditional form of leadership applies. But if you're listening to this as an independent consultant, so often I hear from independent consultants telling me, one of the reasons I want to be an independent consultant is I don't want to manage and lead people anymore. I just want something simple where I can just be responsible for myself. That is one of the reasons why I chose to be an independent consultant also. So I can relate to that. And I thought of that in that way for such a long time, quite frankly, up until recently. But in doing the work that I've been doing in creating the Business Brain Journal and the coaching that I do with independent consultants, I realize that this is a fallacy, that we are a leader. We are a leader. We are a leader of ourselves. And so when we think that leadership doesn't apply once we leave corporate, and of course it doesn't necessarily in the traditional sense, again, unless you have a boutique consultancy or you want a boutique consultancy, But when we think that we've left leadership behind when we leave corporate, it's a big miss. Because in reality, leadership matters more than ever when it's just you. And I'll tell you more about what that means throughout this episode. And it's not necessarily the type of leadership that you might be imagining. Again, to reiterate that, we're not talking about you leading an org anymore if you were a leader when you were in corporate. But what we're talking about here is self-leadership and what that looks like in an intentional way. So today we're going to focus on what it means to be a leader of an independent consulting business and why that matters, what it looks like if you're a bad leader. Listen, you might have left corporate because you didn't want to work for a bad leader or a bad manager anymore, or both. So many of us do. You don't want to be a bad leader to yourself. So we're going to focus on what are the 5 attributes of what a good leader is of an independent consulting business, what a bad leader, what the opposite is, and then also how you can start refining your self-leadership as you're running your business. And then that has actually spawned a concept that I want to share with you that goes hand in hand with self-leadership, and that will be next week's episode. So stay tuned to the end of this episode, and I'll give you a tiny preview of what that means. So a little teaser here. Okay, so that is what we're here for today. Let's talk about the agenda. I'm going to start off with this independent consultants fallacy. Then we're going to talk about why this matters, why leadership matters for an independent consulting business. Then we're going to dive into the 5 components of a good self-leader, and then wrap up the episode with some very tangible next steps for you to put this episode into action. So stay to the end. Okay, before we dive into the first part of the agenda, the companion resource for this episode, I really recommend that you either buy or download my book, Grow Your Consulting Business, the 14-step roadmap to make your independent consulting goals a reality. You can find it at consultingbusinessbook.com or melissabook.com. You can download it for free on my website, or you can go buy it on Amazon. If you've bought it on Amazon, I would really appreciate it if you would leave some feedback. That helps others to find it. But the reason why I recommend this as a companion resource is because chapter 17, let me just triple check that while we're here, that it's chapter 17. Nope, sorry, chapter 16 is all about your business mindset. And so that's what this really folds into, is you growing your mindset as the owner and leader and doer and manager of your consulting business, wearing all the hats. So if you haven't read that, or you haven't read it recently, I would recommend going back to chapter 16 and refreshing there so that you can put this into, take this deeper. Okay. So with that, let's talk about the fallacy of the independent consultant. And I've already touched on this, but to reiterate and reinforce it, so many of us think that we're not leaders anymore. So many of us say things like, I left corporate, so I don't need to be a leader. I left corporate, so I don't have to be a leader. And that's the fallacy. That's the fallacy. You actually are a leader, even if you have an independent consulting business and you don't even have any support whatsoever. You are doing everything yourself: bookkeeping, invoicing, all of your client delivery, all of your marketing, all of it. Even if you're truly operating in a solo method, your leadership still matters. Leadership still matters even without a team. Because without leadership, you're caught in reactive mode, making shorter term decisions, hoping things work out or even out over time, taking on work that whatever shows up, operating off of whatever emotions are happening in the moment. Half of them are great and half of them are not so great. And so when you're not thinking about yourself as a leader of yourself, it becomes very reactive and you're underperforming and undervaluing and under-earning. Versus when you're thinking about and implementing good, effective self-leadership principles, it allows you to stay anchored to your vision and focus on what matters most and boost your confidence, even confidence ahead of the results, and having the ability to create opportunities for yourself rather than reacting to whatever comes across your plate. This isn't optional. You are a leader of yourself. And so recognizing that you're a leader of yourself is truly what unlocks so much more for you in your business. When you're not thinking of yourself as a leader, you've got so many more blind spots and opportunities that you're missing as a result of that. So In a solo business, self-leadership is incredibly important, and without it, you're operating truly as more of a contractor or someone who's a staff augmentation versus someone who's running a business and in control of their own results and destiny. So, with that, and we'll dive in more here as we go as to what impact self-leadership makes. Wanted to give you that broader brush here. But now we're going to talk about the 5 components of a good leader. You might be a leadership coach, so I think it's really fascinating for you to compare what I think is a good component of a leader versus what you might be thinking is a good component of a leader. But when I look at independent consultants specifically, what makes a good leader of an independent consulting business? And it's these 5 components. So I'll list them out for you and then we'll dive into each one of them individually. So the first is being a visionary, someone who defines a compelling long-term vision and uses it to guide decisions. The second is being inspiring, someone who builds and sustains momentum toward that vision. Someone who's an opportunity generator. You're actively creating pathways for growth. The fourth component is being strategic. You're making deliberate choices that are aligned with your goals and priorities. And then the fifth component of what makes a good leader of an independent consulting business is being trustworthy. Someone who keeps their commitments, acts with honesty, upholds high standards for both their clients and themselves. That second half of the equation is usually what trips up so many consultants. So we'll talk more about that here in a moment. So now we're going to talk about those 5 components. Let's start with being a visionary. Being a visionary, you're seeing the future of the business clearly. You're defining and creating a relationship with the future of your business and staying anchored to it, even when distractions arise or even when it feels impossible or something happens to kind of shake that vision. That's being a visionary for yourself in your business. And the impact of that is you aligning your daily choices with the bigger picture and making growth intentional and consistent. When you've got that vision, when you know where you're headed, you're able to use that as a guideline of what work you're pursuing, what work you're not pursuing, what work you're agreeing to take on, what your pricing looks like, and where you're investing. The opposite of that is when you're operating without direction, or you feel that a vision is out of your control and you're accepting work that doesn't build toward your long-term goals. It's very reactionary. Being a visionary in your own business is incredibly important, and really separating out yourself from kind of the different roles that you play in your business. So you put on your leader hat and you refresh it and you revisit it. You define it and you are very clear about what the vision is and is not for yourself and your business over the next 3 to 5 years. It's something that's a practice, not just something that, a bad leader, you've worked for bad leaders for sure. I'm sure over the course of your career, I know I have, but that the bad leader is the one who is not setting a vision where people don't know what direction they're heading. So there's conflict, right? There's conflict because one part of the organization thinks the vision is this way, another thinks it's that way, and it creates so much conflict and it creates so much rework and underperforming because you're not all pulling the rope in the same direction. The same applies to you. If you don't know where you're headed and you're just hoping that you're, recreating your corporate salary, for example, you don't really know why or what the big picture is, then that same conflict happens for you too, even though you're one person. So the guiding question here that I want to share with you when you think about this attribute of being a self-leader is, if someone asked you where your business will be in 3 years, could you answer that with clarity and conviction? Stop the episode and answer that for yourself. If someone asked you where your business will be in 3 years, could you answer that with clarity and conviction? Okay, number 2, are you being inspiring? I know one of the past CEOs that I worked for, past leaders that I worked for when I was in corporate, one of his greatest strengths is being inspiring. Inspiring to the point of, helping people to think, it's a startup. So helping people to see that this was not only going to survive, but thrive and succeed and be a global powerhouse. That was the level of inspiration he was able to create when it was just a company of 3 or 4 of us. So for you, when you think about being inspiring, are you a leader for yourself who keeps that fire for the vision that you've set alive, that you fuel progress and inspire action for yourself, even when the path feels slow or the path feels filled with obstacles or the path feels unrealistic? Are you an inspiring leader for yourself? Because that's the impact of that is that it creates and sustains the momentum for yourself so that you're not stalling and your business isn't stalling when you hit challenges or need to make transitions in your business, which is part of the game, right? You can't avoid challenges or obstacles. Are you an inspiring leader for yourself such that you're able to help you yourself see the bigger picture and move forward to it despite all of those setbacks and challenges and frustrations that come with owning a business? Because the opposite, when you're not inspiring, it's so easy to lose motivation, to question whether this is worth it or not, especially when you don't have evidence or when the results aren't immediate. That's why it's so important to be an inspiring leader for yourself. So, the guiding question that you might ask yourself here with respect to the second principle of being a good self leader as an independent consultant is, in what ways do you inspire momentum toward your vision? In what ways do you inspire momentum toward your vision and goals? And in what ways might that be falling flat for you? I'll say it again, and we'll put this in the show notes as well so you can look at it in the written form. In what ways do you inspire momentum toward your vision and goals? And in what ways are you falling flat from an inspiration perspective? Stop the episode and answer that question for yourself. You want to be an inspiring leader. You want to be able to look at yourself, look at your business and say, you know what, this is worth it. The amount of emotional pain, the amount of sacrifice at times, the amount of being uncomfortable and doing it anyway is worth it because you feel inspired. Number 3, being an opportunity generator. You're someone who proactively seeks and initiates new possibilities for growth. You are the hunter. Think of yourself as the hunter who's providing for the clan. You are the opportunity generator. You want to be the leader who everyone, in your case, yourself, right? But who everyone can trust and rely on to say, you know what? I know that we're headed in the right direction, and I know that we're going to be able to grow, that we're going to be able to make payroll, that we're going to be able to that opportunities are going to come even when the pipeline is empty. That's a leader that we trust, right? When there's opportunity there, when we know that as the leader, we can count on them to create the opportunity that then we can fulfill. And for you, you are the person who's creating the opportunity as the leader and ultimately the one who's fulfilling it, right? Because as the opportunity generator, you're the one who's expanding the business's reach and revenue and potential revenue streams. You are the hunter, and you might not necessarily be thinking of yourself that way, but it's so important that you do because ultimately you're the one who's going out and creating all of the opportunity that then can be fulfilled by the other part, hat that you wear, which is the implementer, the doer, the executor. So the opposite of this is the person who is not a leader, who's waiting for opportunity to come, who's reacting to whatever shows up, who's assuming that growth is mostly out of your control. And this is really common. I want to point this out to you that growth is within your control when you're thinking as the leader and the opportunity generator. So the guiding question here for you to look at this aspect of you as a leader of yourself is, what opportunity have you created, not just responded to in the last month? Make this tangible. Look at this component of self-leadership and figure out for yourself, is this an area of opportunity for you to improve your self-leadership so that ultimately you can be more effective as a business owner? All right, number 4, are you being strategic as a leader? You being strategic. You're someone who sees the big picture and prioritizes the steps and the investments that move your business forward in an innovative, highly impactful way. Being strategic, I don't need to tell you this, but I'm going to remind you of this. Being strategic is what helps you to ensure that your time and energy and resources are invested where they matter the most. Think about when you worked for leaders in the past that were not strategic, who were more reactionary, and how frustrating that was because for me, I know in working with those types of leaders, I never felt like they were thinking 3 steps ahead, that they were kind of paving the way for us to be successful, getting the resources that we needed, getting the priority that we needed, getting the initiatives approved that we needed. It was so frustrating because it always felt like we're kind of pushing the boulder uphill compared to those leaders who were the ones that were 3 or 4 steps ahead of the rest of us and were paving the way to make it a smoother path forward toward reaching the goals that we had set. So for you, think about it, how that applies to you. If you're the type of leader who's paving the way for yourself versus the one who's getting lost in the details and reacting to whatever's urgent and neglecting those initiatives that truly drive growth, the opposite of being strategic. And of course, you've got to be strategic and tactical. Today, we're talking about the hat you're wearing, which is the leader hat that you need to be wearing in your business, most likely more often than what you're doing right now, if you're like most consultants, including myself. I put myself in this bucket as well. I need this reminder just as much as I'm sharing with you here today, sometimes as well. So, the guiding question for you is rate yourself. How well are you keeping perspective on the big picture and focusing on the moves that will create the greatest impact? How strategic are you being in your business? Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Ask yourself, why did you give it that number? And then finally, what would need to change to make you operate in a more strategic fashion more of the time? Those are the guiding questions for you there. Okay, the fifth and final leadership principle as an independent consultant who's leading themselves, and that's being trustworthy. Now, you might glaze past this and say, I'm trustworthy, I operate with integrity, and I won't doubt that at all. If you're running an independent consulting business, I find that most of the time this is the truth. But I think that it's also not always necessarily true when it comes to yourself. So let me tell you more about what that means. I find that independent consultants are typically incredibly trustworthy, credible, operating with integrity when it comes to working with their clients, and less so when they're working with themselves. So let me tell you what that means. When you're being trustworthy, you're doing what you say you're going to do. You're acting with honesty. You're upholding high standards. You're building trust with others. That's the one side of the equation, with your clients and with yourself. That's the part of the equation that I find often falls down when we're self-leading. Here's what I mean by that. Are you someone who says that they're going to work on business development every day for an hour or once a week for a couple of hours and then doesn't do it because client work takes over? Are you someone who says that they're going to build a $1 million pipeline to hit their 500K goal and then doesn't take the action and test and iterate and figure it out until you make that happen? Are you someone who sets goals and then changes them in the middle of the year when it feels shaky that you might not reach them? Are you someone who schedules time to write content or thought leadership and then defers it? That's the type of trustworthiness that I often find falls down. You're able to do it for your clients, but not for yourself. That is incredibly common. The impact of being trustworthy for yourself and for your clients is that you're building a strong reputation that attracts repeat business and referrals and helps you to become that sought after consultant, but it also reinforces your own confidence in yourself, in your ability to follow through with whatever you say you're going to do as a business owner. The opposite of this is that you're breaking commitments. You're eroding your trust internally and externally, could be, but mostly, I would guess, internally. And that's not what you want as a leader. Think about the leader who stands up there and says, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, or we're going to fund X, Y, and Z, or you're going to get promoted, or you're going to get a raise, all of those things, and then they don't follow through. You don't trust that leader, and you might be doing that to yourself without even realizing what the impact is of not being able to trust yourself as the leader of your business, and therefore creating more self-doubt, therefore creating less confidence, and ultimately eroding what could be for you so much more accomplishment, so much more ease in your business, so much more of knowing that you can have control over what doesn't feel controllable in terms of your pipeline and your revenue and the type of work that you're attracting. So the guiding principle, the guiding question here with respect to the trustworthiness principle is, how consistently are you honoring your commitments in a way that builds trust with yourself? How consistently are you honoring your commitments in a way that builds trust with yourself? And what could you do to shift that, to increase that consistency? So those are the 5 leadership principles of a highly effective self-leader in an independent consulting business. And as you can imagine, those 5 principles are what drives ultimately your ability to achieve the vision that you've set, to hit the goals that you set for yourself, even though they feel like a stretch, and for you to feel confident and clear and motivated in your business, and for it to be a sustainable long-term business for yourself. That's why it's so important to focus on these 5 principles. So as we wrap up today's episode, I would encourage you to put this episode into action. And to do that, I would answer those 5 questions that I shared with you, one for each of the 5 principles, and then identify which of the 5 principles is your biggest opportunity. And then from there, pick one leadership principle to focus on for the next quarter, to strengthen it, to improve it, to make it more intentional. And then next week, I gave you that teaser. Next week, we're going to look at the other half of the equation, which is self-management. So we've got being a good leader for yourself in your business. And next week, we're going to focus on being a good manager for yourself in your business. All right? Thank you for tuning in today. I'll remind you, if you want one-on-one help with putting this type of work into action, so you can see and uncover and address your blind spots so that you can achieve your goals and bring your vision to life, you can book a call with me at consultmelisa.com, and we can explore whether coaching is a good fit or not for you specifically at this time. So go to consultmelisa.com and find a time there. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melisaliberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.